Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Plenary 2, which is about advocacy. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, and really Jo Armstrong, the CEO of Cystic Fibrosis Australia, needs very little introduction to this audience. So by way of introduction, I thought I just wanted to share congratulations with her on two things. Firstly, on the extraordinary energy, which she may not quite be feeling at the moment at the back end of the conference, but congratulations on the extraordinary energy and focus that you've brought to bring together a conference that so many people have commented on how collaborative and forward-looking it's been, all focused on outcomes for community. So congratulations on that. And then secondly, Dr. Jo Armstrong, congratulations on recently receiving your doctorate in business leadership. So as Jo comes up, we're just going to see a little video and then we will hear from her. Thank you.
Here we are once again in Canberra. We are at Parliament House meeting with our nation's leaders, talking about all things cystic fibrosis and the critical needs for our community. My name is Jo Armstrong and I am the Chief Executive Officer of Cystic Fibrosis Australia. Cystic Fibrosis Australia is the peak national patient body, and we advocate for people living with cystic fibrosis to ensure the best health outcomes so that everybody with cystic fibrosis can live a longer and healthier life. Cystic fibrosis has a lot of nuances. It looks very different from person to person. So it is critical that the voices of the community are heard in Parliament by our politicians each time that we are here in Canberra. Today we are gathering with a range of stakeholders across the cystic fibrosis community, including clinicians, medical and pharmaceutical representatives, families, friends, loved ones of people living with cystic fibrosis.
I think the CF community have really achieved an enormous amount in recent years through their advocacy, and we wouldn't be where we are today except for the dedication for carers and people with CF really supporting this journey along the way. There are so many problems that are still evident and so many problems that are going to emerge that we need to be front and centre in making sure that our politicians understand what a difficult problem this is, and most importantly, now is not the time to disinvest of CF services and the support for people with CF.
Today for me was really special in coming together with other members of the CF Australia community from all over Australia and really hearing about their experiences, their efforts in advocacy for people like myself with CF and for families and researchers, everyone working in this space together to drive better outcomes for CF. It was really wonderful just to get a sense of how much is actually being done behind the scenes that we don't hear about.
For people affected with CF and their families and their loved ones, advocacy is a really potent way of moving forward, of ensuring that the best advances are made in medical science, in care, in management, and all aspects of their health and well-being.
Today is not the end of our fight for cystic fibrosis. We will continue to advocate. Our work does not stop and our conversations are continuing, that their needs may be recognised across all of our nation's leaders so the voices are heard and progress can be made as we continue to ensure we do everything possible that all people living with cystic fibrosis have the best healthcare outcomes possible.
Thanks, Lisa. Oh, thank you. Haven't even done anything yet. That's very encouraging. And thank you, Lisa, for that introduction. And yes, I do think it's time that I get a new jacket. It's in every photograph. I like to be on brand. Look, I've got 5 minutes, so please do a little dance if I happen to go over, because I'm pretty passionate about the topic of advocacy. So really, I'm just going to set the scene for this session. It was decided by the organising committee that actually advocacy was absolutely critical, that we talk about that today. So I'm setting the scene, quick overview what advocacy is, a few wins in terms of the last decade or so, and actually why it's important to you and how you can get involved. So I hope that sounds okay. Few nods, great, we're going for it. So advocacy, I've got a bit of a summary here. It's really around taking action for people to express their desires, their wants, to secure their rights and pursue interests and obtain necessary services. It's about creating change and providing influence and outcomes so people can really have access to different outcomes. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but just moving on to the next slide, really, Cystic Fibrosis Australia has had 40-year legacy of advocacy, and even longer than that, 60 years within the Cystic Fibrosis Federation. Advocacy is a core pillar of what we do. I hope that's not news to anybody. And really it's about us being one voice to amplify your voices and make it louder together in a really coordinated way. So you'll see recently there's been a lot around access to therapies, modulators. That's not the only thing we advocate for, but given the time, it's been very topical. So that's where you'll have seen a lot of our advocacy recently. The last couple of years, we've actually established the Parliamentary Friendship Group for Cystic Fibrosis, which is huge. Every year we have 1 to 2 events in Parliament House in Canberra with our nation's leaders you saw on the video. And actually every time we've been over capacity with our guests, including parliamentarians. These are people who are making decisions about our country, who hear from people in the community and look at the data as well, which we've spoken about earlier today. So it's really, really exciting. And I think what's important as well is the strong relationships that we can get as part of that. And we're going to be hearing from other speakers in this session who I think will probably build on that as well. So moving on to the next slide. I thought I'd just take a couple of moments to encourage you around some of the advocacy work over the last decade or so. These outcomes are just from this year. Like, no wonder I'm a bit tired. I started this week actually in Canberra. You may have seen the news that from Thursday, from the 1st of August, Trikafta has now been expanded for little ones aged 2 and above. You know, and actually a lot of you were involved in that. It's certainly not something we could do by ourselves. It really is a community effort. If we go on to the next slide, you'll see that only 2022 Trikafta became available for the first time in Australia on the PBS and being subsidised. If anyone was in the session earlier with Adam Jaffe, he made a comment about, you know, it feels like the progress is slow. And absolutely, I would like the progress to go faster. But actually, as he explained so eloquently, in the context of the world, things have actually progressed really fast for CF. It may not feel that way, but the progress is fast. So these points here are just from the last couple of years. And there's a real theme around increasing access and expanding access either via gene mutation or age. If we go on to the next slide, that takes us back 10 years ago. I'd love to see a show of hands if anyone in the room here has been involved in any form of advocacy. Oh my goodness, have I got 2 minutes left? So, whose conference is this? No, I'm joking. Thank you. I'd love to see who's been involved in any form of advocacy for Trikafta, Kaleidos, and Deco, or Canby. This is what it's all about, right? And it's a real credit to working together. Okay, next slide, quick, because we're running out of time. And really, it's about coming together. And I feel that we all have a role to play in advocating in one way or another, whether that's liking a comment on social media. Last year, when we were advocating for Trikafta for the 6 to 11 age group, we put a lot of things on social media, updates, we've written letters here, we're doing this. And the community, and probably a number of you in this room, was so supportive in tagging your local MPs, tagging the relevant people and bringing them into the conversation. That is all advocacy. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to go to a protest or anything, although that can help. But all of these things make a huge difference. I just want to encourage you in that. What are the key things I need to say? The other thing is there's always more happening than what can be shared. For the last 3 weeks, I've been under embargo from the Department of somewhere that I couldn't share about the Trikafta announcement. I had to do a lot of planning. I've had conversations with people in this room saying, can you meet me somewhere in Canberra at this time? I can't tell you why, just come and meet me. And then there's been an announcement. So it is difficult, but I hope that you understand the heart of what we do here at Cystic Fibrosis Australia in channeling this advocacy and trying to really push to get these outcomes as quick as we can for as many people as we possibly can. I feel like I'm about to get booted off the stage. There was one lady in the community who contacted me. She was waiting for her son to have access to Trikafta. And she what can I do, Jo? What can I do? My son's really not well. What can I do? So we worked together to talk through a few options. And where we concluded was that she would write to her local member. She'd provide an update on her son. And she was doing it a couple of times a week because her son's condition was changing quite quickly. And she would label it urgent email. She'd write a summary to the MP, copy me in, and that MP that she contacted comes to every single parliamentary friendship group we've had. It does make a difference, it really does. I'll move on to the next slide. Take photographs. I think it's really important to have more than one jacket. And look, there's three in there, guys. But seriously, because it's about holding people to account, people who are very busy, people who are very influential, and reminding them of the good work that we're doing and why we're doing it. I'll now conclude there. But thank you all for your support and your part. And if you want to get involved or more involved, just reach out to us because it's what we're all about and the great outcomes for all of you. And hopefully in the next conference, we'll have a list of even more great outcomes for more people. Thank you, everybody.
I can't win. I got prompted this morning for not hurrying the speakers up, and now I'm getting in trouble for giving the 2-minute warning sign. But I think each of our speakers we'd love to hear more from, but we've got a lot to cover. And now we have Jess Ragusa, who many of you will have heard in the room next door, but for anyone that hasn't, I'll just briefly cover her bio. So Jess is a CF warrior. She's a mum of 2 healthy baby boys. Well, not so baby anymore in one's case, an ambassador for Cystic Fibrosis Australia, and that's what she's going to be speaking about with today after being part of our work, getting Trikafta listed, working closely with CFA. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you. I am Jess, obviously. I feel like a lot of you probably know that I was a pain in the ass when it was coming to the Trikafta on the PBS. I feel like you probably saw me a lot, whether I was crying on the TV or on the radio. I was there. But in order for me to share my story on the importance of advocacy, I need to share my story. So I'm excited to stand with you here today to talk about my family's commitment to getting me on Trikafta, the lengths it took to advocate for myself and the CF community to ensure that we have access to life-saving, life-changing medication. My story has some tears. If you weren't in the last one, there was lots of tears. Laughter, a whole lot of love, and a very supportive family. Also a few swear words, so don't mind me. As you sit for the next 15 odd minutes, I invite you to join me in discovering the strength, resilience, and hope that can emerge from the most formidable challenges that life presents. The condition that we've all come to know as CF shaped my life's narrative and gave me a unique perspective on the power of human endurance. I was diagnosed at birth, so I don't know much different, but for those around me, it really shook the grounds. With hospital admissions and CF appointments becoming the new norm. But a sentence from one of the best set us on a path. Dr. Peter Van Asperen said, "Don't wrap her in cotton wool." So Mum and Dad just did that. As a kid, I had the regular flare-up, but nothing too serious. I got to run and play as any normal kid would. I was at Westmead Children's Hospital for my paediatric, and then when I turned 18, I went to John Hunter Hospital. That's when shit hit the fan. It was an entirely different world in there, guys. You're really sheltered as a kid, but when you come into an adult hospital, they speak to you differently. They don't sugarcoat anything. You sit in a room, you do as you're told. Mum got kicked out, she wasn't invited. I was an adult. That was really, really scary, especially because not long after I got the call telling me that I'd cultured Burkholderia-cepacia. Despite doing everything we couldn't eradicate it. It became part of my life. It dropped my lung function from the 70s to the 40s, drained a whole heap of colour from my face. I was just physically exhausted all of the time, and my mental and emotional strength was basically gone. It was a tough few years. I'm not really sure what happened next. Lots of tears, lots of hospital admissions, and we just weren't getting any better. I remember sitting with Mum and Dad in the upstairs lounge room, and I said, "I don't want to do this anymore. This is really, really hard, and I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to kill myself, but having CF is really hard." Mum was obviously devastated, but I remember the look on my dad's face, and I think I actually saw his heart break. His little girl wanted to die because everything was too hard for her and he couldn't do anything about it. It was taking the disease, this disease was taking everything from her, both physically and mentally. Her strength and her determination was basically gone. On top of this, at some stage, they sat down, Mum and Dad, and told me that I had 6 months to live. That Burkholderia-cepacia was going to kill me. But the little bit of spark that I had left, a whole lot of stubbornness. I went too many pages, I don't know where I am. So a whole lot of stubbornness, a little bit of determination, and a whole lot of love got us through. Too many tears, guys, I can't. That was 12 years ago. I'm 30 this year. But years went on and I was having hospital admissions. We were keeping my CF at bay. I started seeing a personal trainer, but not like weightlifting. We learned how to breathe. We learned how to walk upstairs and talk. 10 minutes? Did that get bigger? Sorry. We were doing yoga. I was learning how to breathe because I didn't need to have muscle. I just needed to be able to function. I was okay. I think we were probably in a bit of denial about how sick I really was, but for me, that was enough. I was alive, I was doing what I needed to do, I was well. Enough. But 2020 come around, I got married, COVID also hit, so that was a bit scary. But I also had a hospital admission where I was coughing up a considerable amount of blood. I had pleurisy, I had pseudomonas, and I had Burkholderia-cepacia, so you can imagine things were getting quite hard. This one was really, really rocked me. This one really scared me. In the past, we'd spoken about Trikafta. We'd applied for special consideration 3 times. But in the world of the pharma, in the minds of the pharma companies, I was too well because my lung function was in the high 40s, not in the low 40s. We actually considered getting worse so I could have Trikafta. There was a conversation of, is it worth dropping 10% consecutively for month after month to get access to a life-changing medication? But the criteria was really strict. I'm talking if you went 1% above what you were supposed to, too bad, you're well, you're fine, guys, too bad. So we stuck at 49% for some time. So one day we decided to bite the bullet. We took the leap. We started the process of a self-funding patient at a cost of $21,375 a month. Ludicrous amount of money for a family to be paying to keep their child well. Someone put a price tag on my life. My family were paying to keep me alive. But it did just that. 4 weeks since taking the first 2 little pills, my lung function jumped up 24%. Sat in the 80s for the first time since I was 15. I was well, I was breathing, I could sleep, I could function. I barely coughed, I could walk without puffing, and no more vomiting up blood. But unfortunately, for a country that claims it has the best healthcare system in the world, our healthcare system was failing me and my family. Financially, we could afford 9 months of Trikafta, but we were just hoping that day never had to come. Sorry, snot, my apologies. Then one day I decided to share my story. I didn't think much of it. I was just making an Instagram post. I was sitting in an IVF clinic and I was just had enough of mum and dad going, what do we do today? How do we transfer the money to the chemist? Like, sure, let's just pull $21,000 out of our back pocket for this afternoon. I was sick of wearing the mask that showed people how strong I was. I was sick of the concerns all the time of how far away is this 9 months? What's happening? At this stage, we've been trying to have a baby for 2 years. There was nothing wrong with us, technically. It was just a CF thing that was ruining our lives. James was doing his thing in the IVF clinic. I was sitting on the chair waiting. I just wrote and I wrote and I wrote. I also called on the government and the PBAC to pull their shit together and to start subsidising the drug. Didn't think anything of it. But then my story got shared and reshared and some more. People wanted to help. And joining forces with CF Australia, we took on the government. We started petitions, had politicians speak about the importance of this medication in Parliament House. I went to media, I spoke on the TV and on radio. I wanted people to know who Jess Ragusa was, what my life was like, and the ridiculous means a family has to go to stay alive. At this stage, this was pure selfishness. I wasn't doing it for anyone else. I was doing it for me and my family. But each step of the way, I met some incredible people and their families. Families who had lost their loved ones to CF, old-timers defying the odds, patients sitting in hospitals waiting for their lung transplants, or brand new babies with their new life sentence. So by now, this wasn't just personal. This was for people like Richard, who died when he was 11. Patrick, Munro, Ruby, Jessie, Millie, Charlie, Maya, Asher. Grace, who never dated because she didn't want her boyfriend to have to bury her. Or John, who never travelled because CF was going to hold him back. Or their families and everyone else in the CF community. So very quickly, multiple news outlets were sharing my story and people with power knew my name. They claimed they were doing everything they could. It was just taking time. Time that we didn't have. Sharing my story allowed for people to know that little girls can grow up and be married and have a future, or little boys who get to play on the footy field. It gives parents the feeling of hope and that there are advancements happening despite there being no cure. Jo was saying before she's been in this quiet stage for 3 weeks and not being able to tell anyone anything. Jo called me late one Friday night. I was in bed late, probably 8:30, 9 o'clock. And she said, I can't tell you anything. You just have to trust me. But can you book a flight to Melbourne? This might be it, I think were her words. Didn't say much, just her thoughts. So in trusting her, we jumped on the plane. She said that Greg Hunt was going to be there, so I had two thoughts. One was going to be sit down, back off, keep away from the media, or congrats, it's going on the PBS. And April 1st of 2022, it went on. It was no April Fool's joke, guys. It was the biggest sigh of relief for my family and a sign of hope for so many others. But quickly approaching the federal election, we were worried that they'd go into caretaker's mode, or if the other government went in, they weren't going to get elected. So we had to work fast, and fast we did. At the time, it was the fastest it had ever been put on the PBS from the time that the PBAC made the announcement to the time it was in the chemist. Again, proof of advocacy and the importance of a governing body like CFA. But I wasn't finished. I had this fight in me now, so I worked on 6 to 11. They told me to stay away from the media, just, take it as a win, Jess, you got your trifecta. Nope, wasn't good enough for me. So I went back to the media. I shared my story again, and I shared other kids' stories. More and more interviews come and went. More kids were dying sitting in rooms waiting for any other drug that was going to help them. But thankfully, 23, the government announced a trifecta for those 6 to 11, and now just this week, 2+. 2 is really young, and my oldest boy is 2, almost. And to know that he has his entire life ahead of him really puts things into perspective. Having this drug at such a young age literally saves lives. During each advocacy stage, I met with a lot of people, and the general consensus was that if they had access to these types of medications earlier in life, they would have more self-esteem, would listen more in school. The pipe dream of being able to be married or have a partner, a reality. The constant dark cloud that lingers over them. Am I going to die? Am I the next CF patient to die? Thank you. Gone. Because these kids now have long, fulfilling lives that they get to live. I spoke to parents who finally have peace of mind that they don't have to bury their child. And it's conversations like this that really prove the importance of advocacy. It makes you stop and realise what CF takes from you, but also what it makes you. That fault on chromosome 7 that ruins lives also makes you really, really strong. And the stubbornness that I was talking about before, it gets brought out. So in relation to advocacy, whilst it started off with stubbornness and pure selfishness from me, you learn after speaking with these people and these people and these people and these people how important CF modulators or anything that you're advocating for is. It was the first time in so long that CF was even mentioned in mainstream media. Again, important. No one talks about it. Clearly no one listened in high school science because no one knew what CF was. People that I work with didn't even know what CF meant or genetic testing, purely because I shared my Instagram story. Did it become a conversation? You don't have to have action. You just have to do something. So I urge you to share that post or to comment on something or to take a photo. You don't have to ugly cry and snot in front of everyone. You just have to share. You don't understand the impact that it makes, because I now speak to people who are so overwhelmed that I paved the path for them. I didn't do it by myself, but I sure as hell made a very blunt, rude response to the government of, hello, don't forget about us. Guys, advocacy is really, really important. And yes, you can do whatever you need to, but in the community, it's really important to have. I lost my speech about 20 pages ago, so I'm really sorry. But it's life-changing, life-saving, and life-creating, because I now have 2 healthy little boys, and advocacy got us trifecta, so thank you.
Thank you, Jess. And Jess, of course, is just one of the more than 7,500 plus people that we now have living in Australia with cystic fibrosis. And we like to thank, on behalf of the Federation of Cystic Fibrosis, all the states and territories, each and every one of you that adds your voice to our campaigns. And as Jess said, that simply likes our social media, that tags, that shares. It's about amplifying our voices. And thank you all for the work that you do in helping us with our cause. I would now like to welcome Lizzie Van Dongen, a musculoskeletal physiotherapist and Pilates instructor living with cystic fibrosis. Lizzie is particularly interested in the therapeutic benefits of exercise in helping to manage cystic fibrosis. To this end, Lizzie has partnered with Beam, an online exercise platform for people with cystic fibrosis. Together with Beam, Lizzie has delivered live Pilates classes, webinars, and set up a running support group to help educate others and share her first-hand experiences on exercising with cystic fibrosis. Lizzie is extremely passionate about helping others to live a life unencumbered by doubt or disease. Welcome, Lizzie.
Thank you. Jess, that was just phenomenal. Where are you, Jess? That was phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I think that the absolutely resounding message from today is just that there is so much hope for our future. And that is such a privilege, but it doesn't come without the need to continue to advocate. So thank you for having me. It's an absolute honour to be given the opportunity to share with you my 6.5 life lessons from living with 65 roses. So this is where it all began. I was born in Hobart into a tight-knit family of 4. My mum, my dad and my sister, and you can pick who's who. And I was diagnosed with CF at 10 weeks of age through a positive sweat test. And it was a big surprise for my family because I had no known relatives with CF. So my first lesson, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. When I was young, I was fit, I was active, and I was healthy. My parents ensured CF would not be a barrier to me living a very full and fun life. And despite our incredibly different bodies, I was treated the same as my sister. I played soccer and tennis and badminton. I rode, I swam, and I ran. I coughed a little bit more than usual and had to take tablets whenever I ate, and I'd spend 30 minutes each morning and night doing my lung physio. But the effects of the disease were relatively minimal, as long as I did my treatments, which was perhaps easier said than done. And I think early on my parents didn't know how CF would affect my ability to play and do sport. They had this blessing of a total lack of expectation, and they just told me to give it a go. And I think that we can so easily get caught up in expectations of ourselves, of how we think things should be or we think things should look, that these expectations distract us from the moment and the opportunity to just give things a go. So I started where I was, I used the body I had, and with the help of my parents, I did all that I could. My second lesson, growth happens in uncomfortable places. So growing older, the progressive nature of cystic fibrosis became more evident. At 13, I started to feel the effects of the disease more. I knew the difference of a day with and without my lung treatments. Laughing led to coughing, and food without a tablet would very glamorously pass straight through me, and I started averaging about 1 hospital admission a year. And these were my first real test of resilience. I'd be on my IV antibiotics and tied to hospital bed for 2 weeks, and for a girl who lives for the outdoors, I felt like I lost part of my identity. I would work so hard to keep CF hidden that when I ended up in hospital, I couldn't stop CF from taking the front and centre. And at first, the hospital admissions weren't a big deal. I would go in really unwell, but I would go in knowing, with the full belief that I would come out a lot better. And I knew that I could trust that when I left hospital, my breathing would be easier, my cough would be less aggressive, and I'd have a little bit more wiggle room to test the boundaries. But this changed when I moved interstate to study physio. I started averaging 2 to 3 admissions a year. When I didn't bounce back and come out of hospital feeling $1 million, I was reminded about the deteriorating nature of the disease. I struggled to regain my lung function, my cough didn't disappear, and my lung function didn't creep back up. And this challenged me to find new ways to hold on to that hope that I hadn't yet reached the pinnacle of my potential. Between these years, another event tested my family's resilience. My dad was diagnosed with a terminal cancer and he passed away within 6 months of his diagnosis. And there are a lot of similarities between managing grief and a chronic condition. And one of them being that we can't choose what happens to us, but we can choose our response. And a man, Viktor Frankl, says, between stimulus and a response, there is a space. And in that space lies our power to choose. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And 3 months after Dad passed away, my sister Alison was diagnosed with a thankfully curable cancer. So life throws us curveballs, and as uncomfortable as they are, they can challenge us to grow, and you will always have a choice in this. Lesson 3, you don't have to be good to start, but you have to start to be good. And whilst I lay in hospital bed during one of my admissions in 2017, I was particularly restless. So on a whim, I signed up for the City to Surf, a 14K fun run. A new goal into the unknown. There was nothing I could compare it to, and hence no pressure and no expectation. All I had was curiosity. Later that year, I finished the City to Surf, and I was hungry for more. Running became part of my routine. I could combine it with my lung treatments. Instead of hiding in my room, I was part of an active community. It was my excuse to go to the beach and breathe in that salty air. And coming out of hospital, I would find myself in a state of limbo, caught between what I was once capable of and where I stood then. I was uncertain where time would take me and what it would mean I could still do. Running became my answer. It was a way I could translate my clinical status into something that was more meaningful. If I could run 10 kilometres before becoming unwell, I would aim to build up to 10 following my admission. And if I got to that point, I would justify that I was outrunning the disease progression. And despite my lack of expectation, the further I passed it, the more hope filled my cup and the freer my future looked. But it was challenging to build up my runs from scratch after an injury or after a lung exacerbation. Accepting that space between where I was and what I'd once been able to do was a tough pill to swallow, and certainly one I choked on. Navigating this was either a pro or a con, depending on how much optimism I could sprinkle on my Weet Bix. On a good day, I could see it as another opportunity for growth. It was a chance to gain skills and invest time in my life that running would often override. On the tougher days, I saw it as a mountain I didn't know if I could summit. And on these days, this saying became my mantra. You don't have to be good to start, but you have to start to be good. So I would start with 1 kilometre, 5 kilometres, 10 kilometres, 21, 42, and eventually I made it to 65. As my runs got longer and training became more intense, I soon learned to expect the unexpected. Although I could run 10 kilometres one morning, there was no guarantee I could run 2 kilometres the next. And I had to listen to my body, learn when to push, and learn when to fold. And if I felt discouraged or damp when my body wouldn't hustle to my plans, I'd chant gratitude lists as I walked, for people, for places, for memories, for experiences. And this grounded me, and it eventually led me back to my reassuring mantra. Lesson 4, you have a choice. So more time passed and CF started to creep into other facets of my body and my life. I started to have more issues with my tummy, my sinuses, my bones, my vocal cords, my sleep, my work, and of course, my running. In early 2022, my hospital admissions started to lose their magic. I struggled to manage the burden of my symptoms. I dropped back from full-time work to 3 3-hour shifts a week. My health was declining, and largely this was totally out of my control. During this time, though, a new medication called Trikafta had a miraculous effect on many people with CF around the world, and having already been available in the US and the UK, as well as some countries in Europe, Trikafta was changing the course of the disease in many parts of the world. It had been approved to be sold in Australia, but as we know, it was ridiculously expensive. A petition with a few signatures had already gone before Parliament to get the medication subsidised and made affordable, but this was unsuccessful. Then enters Joe Armstrong and the miraculous work that CFO was doing. During a web conference, an incredible woman with CF spoke about how her situation was so dire, her family was looking at remortgaging their home loan to afford access to the medication. And Jess, there's no better lead into this, but this was you. You gave me the courage and the confidence and made me put my finger out and do something about it. So thank you so much. I then got off this web conference, I went for a run, I sorted my thoughts, and I sent an email to Joe, CF Australia, about a campaign idea, and I wanted to get more community support to get Trikafta subsidised, and I wanted to know what we could do so that Jess's family and no other would have to choose between losing their house or losing their daughter. And CF is like many diseases that face the benefit and downfalls of being an invisible disease. And for the majority of my life, I have been entirely grateful for this. But in moments like these, it was the biggest issue. No one could see CF for its debilitating potential. Before I became too unwell, some of my close friends had no idea I had it. Its community presence was hidden, and I attribute the failure of the first campaign to this. So if we were going to get more signatures on this petition, it was going to have to be visible. And my proposal was that we get as many people as possible to share their CF journey and what getting Trikafta would mean for them and their families. And this was not something I was at all comfortable doing, and I felt like I was doing a lot of my hard work to keep CF under wraps. But to start the campaign, I posted the first video, and it was an 8-minute video of me being the most vulnerable version of myself I've ever shown, and discussing themes and thoughts that not even my closest friends or family had heard. And whilst I felt helpless to fight what my body was enduring, I had a choice between my ego and my ability to help make a change. Lesson 5, support the change you wish to see in the world. The response was overwhelming, to say the least. The video gained over 19,000 views. I watched the signatures on the petition grow as the media attention and CFA's campaign continued to soar. 58,274 people decided to take 2 minutes out of their day to sign a document to help thousands of people around Australia have the best chance to live a little longer and a little better. My message from this is to be present in your community. Take the small, conscious steps to support the change you want to see through whatever means is available to you. It might be starting a conversation, might be clicking like, it might be facilitating a connection, volunteering your time, volunteering your ear, your shoulder, or your hand. But we ought to recognise the value of our contribution. I expect to pass through life but once. If, therefore, there may be any kindness I can show or any good thing I can do to any fellow being, let me do it now and not defer or neglect it, as I shall not pass this way again. Everything you do has an impact, and it's your choice what your impact is. So support the change that you want to see. And with privilege comes responsibility. I started Trikafta in April 2022. I woke up and actually saw an Instagram post from Jess, and I somehow picked up my phone, I put it down, I went back to sleep, and I woke up and thought, what? And yeah, it was a really nice thing to wake up to. But in the space of a week, I stopped coughing and waking with a pounding headache. I started sleeping through the night. I woke bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, no longer needing 2 hours to prepare for my day with showers, sinus rinses, countless pills, nebulizers, nose sprays. I got out of bed and I felt young and energised and human. Within 6 months, I ran my first 100-kilometre ultramarathon and I came third in my age group. 2 years later, I took a year off work and I spent 6 months travelling the world, camping, hiking and trail running through the Americas and Europe. And that's where all these photos are from. Highlights include hiking through Patagonia and running the Mont Blanc circuit, and 180-kilometre trail around the mountain that borders France, Italy and Switzerland. And a few months ago, I did another 100-kilometre ultra marathon and I won. Which is not something I could have done without Trikafta. And now I'm 27 and I'm thinking about starting a family with the hope and the trust that my body can be there for them. I'm back at uni and studying my masters, and CF was starting to strip me of things, my dreams, my voice, my energy, my time, but Trikafta's given it all back, and it's given me hope for new dreams and work I have the passion and energy to complete. It has given me more time with family, with friends, with nature, and with a clear sense of purpose. And it's flipped this disease on its head. A disease associated with rapid deterioration and progressive decline is now giving me time back. But with this incredible privilege comes a responsibility to invest my time and energy to help others live a life unencumbered by doubt, disease, illness, or injury. And we are incredibly privileged to be here today, learning what we're learning, and to be surrounded by such a phenomenal support network. And my final 0.5 of a lesson is that everything's temporary. The good, so enjoy every last minute of it. The bad, so hang in there, this too will pass. And the ordinary, something new and exciting, lays just around the corner.
Your stories, I also think both of the girls reinforce the power of advocacy across the Federation. And of course, we're only just warming up, we're only just starting on Trikafta. There are still many people in our CF community who don't have access to a modulator, and our work is far from done. So I just think we need to give a round of applause for everybody in the Federation who's been supporting the advocacy for 10 years, and we look forward to the day when we can talk about a cure for CF. So our work is far from done. It's just the start, everybody. I'd now like to warmly welcome Scott Lancaster, who's our President of Cystic Fibrosis Australia, and both Scott and Joe Armstrong are going to chair us through the final session. Thank you.